The tariff war. It is not something that the GOP is agreed upon. In fact, there are high-profile GOPers who are pushing back against the president's tariff war, just in general. What's the strategy seems to be the most common question being asked. It's being asked by everyone. You heard Elizabeth Warren this week on one of the Sunday shows talking about it. You hear GOP senators and congresspeople, particularly senators, asking these questions. So Senator Ron Johnson says he wants to know the end game for Trump's tariff plan. He was on News Nation, and he says that businesses are looking for certainty. Of course, the one thing you don't get from this administration in any way is certainty. There's a 90-day pause on the higher, what are being called reciprocal tariffs, even though they're not, for selected countries. But after that, it's suggested that there are going to be any number of additional tariffs, not just the tariffs that Trump was talking about, but specific sectors of the economy and of the imports will be targeted. Let's get to some video. I believe this is Rand Paul pushing back on the president's plan. Go ahead, Tony.
How did we all get here? I mean, the whole debate is so fundamentally backwards and upside down. It's based on a fallacy. And the fallacy is this, that somehow in a trade, someone must lose. That somehow when you trade with someone, there's a loser and someone's taking advantage of you and China's ripping you off or Japan's ripping you off. It's absolutely a fallacy. Every trade that occurs in the marketplace is mutually beneficial. If you have a free society and I trade with you, if you want to sell me your coat and I give you $200 for it, we both agree to it and we're both happy with the trade. No American consumer trades with China. They trade with Walmart, or they may buy something from China, but they individually buy something they want and they make a decision. The trade is always a win-win. Now, you could artificially do this accounting between countries and say, oh, trade deficit, look at this trade deficit. But I have a trade deficit with my grocery store. The people who employ me, if I work for Corvette and they employ me, they have a trade deficit with my labor. They buy my labor and I never buy their cars. So you can have this artificial accounting and it makes it look like a bad thing, but you have to ask yourself, is trade good or bad? And if you look at the trade deficit, in times of a recession, the trade deficit goes down. So if the tariffs push us into a recession, we could reduce the trade deficit because we're all buying less stuff. We have to get back to the fundamentals of, is trade good or is trade bad?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think that really reflects what is a strong feeling on the part of GOPers even. That's why this is notable, that in his own party, the president is getting pushback. The other place he's getting pushback, of course, pushback is coming from Wall Street, business owners, and small business people are being crushed by this. There is no way to plan when you don't know when a tariff is going to happen and how big a tariff will be levied. These are import taxes. We call them tariffs, but they're import taxes, right? So I'm paying a tax for that import. And when I don't know what it is, I have no way to plan in the future. Plus, I have no way to source that material from maybe a nation or a place where the import tax is lower, because it looks like they're constantly refiguring these things. In 90 days, we're going to have another group. Here is Elizabeth Warren on this issue.
To saying, well, I will continue to make those decisions and I'm going to hold off on these tariffs for 90 days. That doesn't put the economy in a better place. That doesn't put investors in a better place. Congress has a job right now, and that is to step up and take this authority away from Donald Trump. He has proven how he will use it, but remember, the statute that he's now using starts with a declaration of emergency. And in that same statute, Congress has the responsibility to decide, is it really an emergency or not? Are we really in an emergency with Belgium right now? Are we really in an emergency with South Korea? Congress can say, no, there's no emergency. It's a resolution. And if we do that, it takes Donald Trump back to the trade as we had it before. And tariffs are then decided with Congress having an important say in it. And that's an important signal to the rest of the world. Right now, it's a no curbs on Donald Trump, and that means chaos and corruption. We have an opportunity in Congress to vote that down and to say, no, we are going to use tariffs in a far more targeted way. We're sure not headed in the direction he wants to go. All of the Democrats are ready to support that. But we got to get the Republicans, or at least some of the Republicans, on board to make that happen. They've got to decide, is their job just to suck up to Donald Trump, or is their job to stand up for the American people?
JP,
Yeah, so that's the legislative angle on it, which is that all this power to levy these import tariffs, these import taxes, all that power was ceded to Donald Trump. And Congress never should have ceded that. The declaration of a national emergency, Donald Trump is declaring these emergencies so he has the power of the presidency to then do any number of things. In this case, it's tariffs. She's saying we need to take that back because that is essentially opening the door to this ridiculousness, which is all residing in Donald Trump, who doesn't really have a plan. He just knows, I wake up one day and I want 140% tariff on China and Vietnam. It's not even computed correctly. As you know, we've been over this and done it chapter and verse. But this herky-jerky total ineptitude is destroying the American economy and destroying world economies. So she's saying, take the power back, Congress.
Is that realistic, though? Do you see the GOP standing up and saying, no, Trump, we're going to handle this now?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think that they've really ceded power, as I say, to this guy. And he's pretty well controlling things. I'm halting now because I'm thinking, how long will it take when you run the American economy completely off the road? Then you're going to see Congress step up because Trump will become politically more radioactive. But that's the politics of it. But here's the reality. Once you've ceded a bunch of power to him, it's tough to get it back. And I'd say be careful. It already may be something, as you say. I mean, could they take it back today? No, there just isn't the coalition on the GOP side. So we'll see. I mean, they've really thrown their lot in with Donald Trump, but he doesn't know what he is doing. I mean, he is just a guy at the switch, and, he's flying a plane. He has no idea how to fly it. And it's scary. So this is funny. Trevor Starr in Hollywood says, remember, Trump is 78 years old, but the 7 is silent. It is. They are the fits and starts of an adolescent. You know what I mean? Somebody who doesn't know anything, but just with the petulance, and the anger, just says, I'm going to double your tariff. I'm going to. And so essentially you've shut down trade with China, right? You really have. And the last thing I'll say about the China thing is China doesn't want to call Donald Trump, and China isn't going to call Donald Trump. There's this sense somehow everybody I know is coming to try to make a deal with the U.S., and that in itself is awful. She's right. It opens the door to corruption on a massive scale. It's basically that pay to play that I talk about on the show all the time. It's the self-enrichment. It's a patronage system. Right? I'll make an exception for you. I'll make an exception for you. I just made an exception for Apple. And there are carve-outs and exceptions for all of these different constituencies. Those constituencies that money the chief executive or give him an interest in another way, that whet his beak. And this is the new setup that I believe just leads to an unbridled corruption, further than we've even seen. What else do you have for me, Tony? Go ahead. Maybe I thought you had. Yeah, that's right.
Time.
Lutnick, exactly.
So let's start with
The
that
thing about,
news.
I'm going to let this run. Stop for a second, Tony. I'm going to let this run. But what I want you to hear, Lutnick is a cheerleader And he's supposed to be the Secretary of Commerce. And he is a cheerleader without explanation, without plan, without a blueprint, without a perspective that makes any sense, nothing you can plan on. But listen to him repeat like some kind of refrain in the song he sings all the time about Donald Trump is great. It's going to be a great plan. We're all going to be dancing in your mansion. It's all going to work out so great. Go ahead, Tony. I won't interrupt again.
Let's start with that news late Friday, that this exemption on electronics, smartphones, laptop computers, and the like. What's the thinking? Why the exemption?
Well, if you remember, over the past couple of months, President Trump has called out pharmaceuticals and semiconductors and autos. He called them sector tariffs, and those are not available for negotiation. They are just going to be part of making sure we reshore the core national security items that need to be made in this country. We need to make medicine in this country. We learned it during COVID. We need to make it in this country. We need to make semiconductors, because if we don't own semiconductors here, remember, virtually all semiconductors are made now in Taiwan and they're finished in China. It's important that we reshore them. And so the president is going to come out with his policies on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. They're going to be outside the reciprocal tariffs. And he was just making sure everyone understood that all of these products are outside the reciprocal tariffs, and they're going to have their own separate way of being considered.
But wait a minute. I'm asking you about the exemption, not about, I mean, the notice that went out Friday night saying that electronics, a wide range of electronics, including smartphones, including components used to make microchips, that these are now exempt from the reciprocal tariffs. Why that move?
I used to think that spring.
Yeah, we have to, little interruption, but continued now. So this is Howard Lutnick on this week.
Remember, those products are going to be part of the semiconductor sectoral tariffs, which are coming. So you're going to see this week, there'll be a register in the Federal Registry. There'll be a notice put out. That is different types of work. So we're going to do that. We did that in autos. The president's going to do it for pharmaceuticals, and he's going to do it for semiconductors. So all those products are going to come under semiconductors, and they're going to have a special focused type of tariff to make sure that those products get reshored. We need to have semiconductors. We need to have chips, and we need to have flat panels. We need to have these things made in America. We can't be reliant on Southeast Asia for all of the things that operate for us. So what he's doing is he's saying they're exempt from the reciprocal tariffs, but they're included in the semiconductor tariffs, which are coming in probably a month or two. So these are coming soon. You shouldn't think this is really outside of it. Really think of it as being included in the semiconductor space, much like pharmaceuticals. These require special attention, and the president is on it.
So you're saying that the big tariffs on things like smartphones and laptops, iPhones, all those iPhones built in China, that those tariffs are temporarily off, but they're going to be coming right back on in another form in a month or so? Or what are you saying?
Correct. That's right. That's right. Semiconductors and pharmaceuticals will have a tariff model in order to encourage them to reshore, to be built in America. We need our medicines, and we need semiconductors and our electronics to be built in America. We can't be beholden and rely upon foreign countries for fundamental things that we need. We can't be relying on China for fundamental things that we need. Our medicines and our semiconductors need to be built in America. Donald Trump is on it. He's calling that out. So you should understand these are included in the semiconductor tariffs that are coming, and the pharmaceuticals are coming. Those two areas are coming in the next month or two. So this is not like a permanent sort of exemption. He's just clarifying that these are not available to be negotiated away by countries. These are things that are national security that we need to be made in America.
Okay, so let me just say this. If you didn't understand that, there's a reason, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He literally is just making it up. He's flying truly by the seat of his pants on this, because he's basically saying, oh, the president made these exceptions because he wants to let everybody know that those aren't negotiable, but they, in another 90 days, we're going to have another set. We have pharmaceuticals, we have semiconductors. There is no coherence here. Even if you take what this guy just says, and as I say, he is just the great American BS machine. It is, somebody said in the chat, blah, 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 BS. Uncle Russ, thank you very much. That's what that was. The administration, if you take what that guy just said, Lutnick, so you're telling me then you're going to tariff semiconductors, you're going to tariff chips coming into this country, you're going to tariff the component parts of these things that are used here and then assembled to make a product that is purchased by Americans. Why then am I incentivized as the entity putting these component parts together to keep my factory in this country? Why don't I move it offshore? That way I can get my component parts from all of these different places and it won't be tariffed. If I keep my factory which puts together all of these component parts in this country, all the component parts are now insanely expensive, and my product no one's going to buy because it's going to be too expensive. So I should offshore it where I can get all those component parts cheaper. That's just one thing that is crazy about what this guy's just said. His entire dance is BS. And all of them are speaking BS because they're covering their butts for a guy who doesn't know what he's going to do hour to hour and is completely motivated by this world of, frankly, corruption and ingratiation, where people just come to essentially kiss the ring. It's got to be a great feeling. Phones ringing off the hook. But as we told you the other day, it took 2 years to make the trade deal with Canada and Mexico. Now you've got the phone ringing off the hook. You got 50 to 90, even more trade deals to make. You don't have that kind of time, or you got to be on the golf course. So I don't know what the plan is here. There is no end game that makes sense, and these guys know it. And the last thing I'll say on this, before I got one other video, the last thing I'll say is Europe and many of the powerful countries around the world, they're not down with the ingratiation game. They're not down with begging for some kind of American policy that favors them. They may do it in the short term, but that's not a long-term plan. Plain and simple. The Economist did a great article on just this thing I'm talking about. Europe and other countries around the world are making other trade plans. America is going to be cut out of it. This isolationism is a bad idea. It's easy to take a chance on the economy. Oh, I missed the last part. When it won't affect you. Lutnick and company. Thank you. These are billionaires. When you hear Lutnick speak, I don't know how he got to be a billionaire. I really don't. But he is, and it's the Billionaires Boys Club that runs the Trump administration. Now to CNN and polling, which shows that the American public is beginning to turn in some big ways on this Donald Trump policy. Then we'll move on. Take a look.
So, obviously, you had Joe Biden before you had Donald Trump. And, of course, Donald Trump would say, Joe Biden left us in a horrible state, and I have to help dig us out of it. All right, so let's take a look here. More responsible for the state of the economy or the economic state. In March, CBS News asked about inflation, and 38% said it was Joe Biden who was more responsible, compared to 34% who said Donald Trump. Let's jump forward to now, in the month of April. Look at this number. 54% of Americans say that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's number has fallen from 38% to 21%. Donald Trump may try to blame Joe Biden for this, and maybe that was working a month ago in the month of March. But since the tariff war has begun, it's not working anymore. Americans are not buying what Donald Trump is selling them. They believe, the clear majority, 54%, that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy at this point than Joe Biden is, Jessica.
That is interesting to see how that evolves just in the last month, really.
Yeah.
How are they viewing tariffs?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the big thing when it comes to the state of the economy right now for Donald Trump is tariffs. So let's take a look here. All right. The tariff plan, new tariffs on importing goods, oppose versus favor. You go back to January, Look at this. 48% said they favored these new tariffs, these Donald Trump tariffs, compared to 46% who opposed. Look at where we are now in the CBS News YouGov poll. A switcheroo, Jessica, a switcheroo. The clear majority, 58% of Americans oppose these new tariffs compared to just 42% who favor them. Again, this is part of the picture that we've seen throughout this presentation, right, Jessica? More and more people are turning against Donald Trump. Their views of the economy are getting worse. They are holding Donald Trump responsible. And when it comes to his signature issue, so far in his second term, tariffs, I mean, my goodness gracious, that trend line is ridiculously awful for Trump. The opposition number from 46 to 58 and the favor from 48 to 42. Americans have switched on a dime on the economy, on Donald Trump, in large part because of the tariffs, which they increasingly do not like.
Thank you very much for that, Tony. So I think that the tide is turning. I mean, he really, I don't know that guy on CNN, but he really sells it. I think it will get even worse as you begin to see really the inflationary spiral will be pronounced. But I want to go back to Howard Lutnick and what he was saying about, we want to get semiconductors and chips manufactured and done here in this country. We don't want to be dependent on the supply chain the way we were in COVID. That he might have said that so many times that you began to figure, wow, they must rehearse this or must be a talking point. And it is laudable. I mean, he said it over and over because he know it lands well, because it makes sense, right? The idea somehow that we should produce semiconductors in this country, that there should be manufacturing and research done in this country, and we shouldn't be beholden and dependent on China or any other nation to provide these things that we might need in the case of an emergency, and pharmaceuticals fall into the same category, and we saw it in the supply chain. The only problem with that is what? We had that. We had the CHIPS Act under Biden. That was designed to do just what Lutnick was talking about, to onshore. And it was done with federal money. It was a $280 billion, boosting U.S. semiconductor manufacturing, research, and workforce development. Those are the primary goals of the CHIPS and Science Act, to reduce the nation's reliance on foreign-made chips, strengthen global supply chains, and revitalize American semiconductor production. It's right there. Trump undid it because it's Biden. The same way he undid the Iran nuclear deal because it was Obama. The reality is we were on track to do those things that Lutnick is talking about. We were also on track with a really good economy, best in the developed world. That all seems like ancient history because it's changed just in the last 2 months. He made exemptions on all these electronics because Apple and others got to him, but screw the rest of us, says Carol Perkins. I think he's all over the place, which is why you just don't know what's going to happen next. But I do think there is increasing pushback from his own party. There'll be increasing pushback from the U.S. electorate. And on some level, that will affect his own party as well. So all of that's still to come. I mean, I think those developments will happen over the next few months. The last thing, and it's been kind of advertised, this is Ray Dalio, the hedge fund investor who is famous for some pretty bold predictions. I have a few of his books around this house somewhere. And here he was, I forget exactly where he was talking, might have been, not important. Anyway, this is Dalio on Meet the Press, I think it was, on his sense of the future. So this just was yesterday.
I'm talking about a recession. Do you think it is likely that the United States will dip into a recession?
He's super
because
careful,
of
you'll
President
hear him.
Trump's
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well. Let's take the debt situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, very quickly, because I want to be very specific about what you mean. You're saying worse than recession. You're saying this is reminiscent of the 1930s. We should tell our viewers you correctly predicted the 2008 financial crisis. What is your prediction for where the country is headed right now?
Right now, we're at a juncture. Let's take the budget. If the budget deficit can be reduced to 3% of GDP, it will be about 7%
This
if
is
things
big
are
thing,
not changed.
the deficit.
If it could be reduced to about 3% of GDP, and these trade deficits and so on are managed in the right way, this could all be managed very well. I believe that members of Congress should take the pledge, what I call the 3% pledge, that in one way or another, that they will get that budget deficit down to that number. If they don't, we're going to have a supply-demand problem for debt at the same time as we have these other problems. And the results of that will be worse than a normal recession.
So, and just to follow up on that point, worse than a recession, you're talking about the 1930s. What specifically are you warning of? Are you saying that it could be as bad as a depression? What's your biggest fear?
The value of money. What is a storehold of wealth? That is a bond. In other words, one man's debt is another man's assets, bondholders. And so we're going to be in a situation where if that storehold of wealth is in jeopardy because there's too much supply and demand and so on, and we have a monetary inflation, we will have great disruptions. And that could be like the breakdown of the monetary system in 71. It could be like 2008. It's going to be very severe. I think it could be more severe than those if these other matters simultaneously occur. Imagine if we have a downturn politically and an international conflict.
What's worst case scenario that you're warning of? To be very specific, to be very
specific, the value of money, internal conflict that is not the normal democracy as we know it, and international conflict in a way that is highly disruptive to the world economy and could even be a military conflict, just as these breakdowns have occurred before. You know, we have a new order that began in 1945, a new monetary order and a new geopolitical order. And these go in cycles that can be measured. And I worry about the breakdown of that kind of an order, particularly since it doesn't need to happen, because there are certain things that could be done in which this is a better restructuring of these debts and actions taken.
So that takes me to my next question. You have this book, How Countries Go Broke.
Yeah, I'm going to stop it there. I mean, it's getting a little bit in the weeds, but you get the general sense. He's being very careful about what he says. For Dalio, a lot of his stuff is informed by the debt, and it's important. I think he touched on something that is huge. You know, I mentioned this to you last week. It's really the thing that got Trump to, pause those tariffs. It was the bond market. It's the Treasury bond market, which has always been in America, in the world. American bonds, Treasury bills, are gold. They are the safest haven in a violent, changing, unpredictable world. Our T-bonds are the thing that everybody rushes to. That's why so much of our debt is all over the world, because this is viewed as a stable economy in general, a stable political system in general, and as a place to put money where it will be safe. It's always viewed, those Treasury bills, they become a place where you can park big amounts of money and not have to worry. The government of America isn't going to default. The government of America isn't going anywhere. And as I say, there's a solidity to everything. Well, now you don't have that. You had panic in the markets last week around that, around the bond market. And that's what's happening in increasing ways. to undercut the faith that the world has in America. It was front page of the New York Times today. Trump, here you go. Trump tariffs shake faith in the safety of U.S. bonds. I still get the paper, I know. But it's a real thing. And so when you talk about your debt and essentially writing checks that you can't cover, you need to lay that debt off. And there may be increasing challenges in finding entities, countries that will take that U.S. debt. So all of these things are working. That's what Dalio was saying in the midst of everything else he was saying. There's going to be a crisis of confidence in the bond markets, and you may not be able to lay that debt off. And meantime, you're just running up more and more debt like it's business as usual, and you cannot do that. Anyway, newspaper, what's that? Exactly. Thank you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.